one thing doing one's best on a premise doomed to fail on the merits of a subpar foundation, but imploding on a premise that Stephen King would be proud of? That is an utterly unacceptable status quo amongst horror fans, and incidentally, the tragic core reason behind the infamy of some of the more egregiously subpar horror shows to date. So with that in mind then, I'm Ellie with What Culture, here with horror TV shows that wasted incredible premises. The Strain. While he might claim otherwise, The Strain is a notable offering that celebrated director Guillermo del Toro would seek to brush his involvement with under the carpet. Fantasy horror drama The Strain is not the worst show ever conceived by any means. While operating on considerably played-out genre tropes, the series' combination of wince-inducing gore and engaging storylines mean that it is not terrible by any means. Rather, The Strain exists as the perfect example of an outing languishing within realms housing series falling into the distinctly median category. After a plane load of dead passengers morbidly trundle into JFK International Airport, the show's plot morphs into an intrinsic notion, combining the best elements of outbreak blockbusters such as Contagion, supernatural elements of Bram Stoker's Dracula, and the unashamed gore of a certain Mr. Quentin Tarantino. The Strain is a legitimately groundbreaking new take on combining such alien premises, and the fact that it falls as flat as it does is agonizingly unexplainable. For some ineffable reason, viewers find themselves unable to empathize with or get behind the characters at the heart of the Strain's plot, and any lingering quality from the show's first season disappears rapidly as the second installment debuts. Sci-Fi's offering stands to this day as one of the more frustratingly disappointing examples of premise wasting in recent memory. Van Helsing. Van Helsing possesses one of the most expansive premises in horror television history. The show follows the tale of Vanessa Van Helsing, who awakens from a coma to find the world she knew gone, replaced with a hellish landscape which is ruled by malevolent vampires. Van Helsing's importance to the storyline is soon revealed. She alone possesses the power to return humans to their original form after they've been turned into vampires. After Hugh Jackman's cartoonish 2004 adaptation, which featured some of the worst CGI in cinematic history, hopes were high for this new spin-off centered around one of Van Helsing's descendants. In addition to a female lead, the role of iconic antagonist Dracula has also been swapped, providing what appeared to be yet another indicator of a uniquely original premise that would hopefully mark a new beginning for the flagging IP. Sadly for viewers, the fact that Van Helsing aired for 5 successful seasons is baffling rather than celebrated. While unquestionably a marked improvement on the disastrous blockbuster in terms of critical reception, the show is a notably unremarkable outing in terms of quality, particularly when one considers the wildly exciting premise upon which it is based. Reflecting this regrettable fact, audience ratings fell off drastically with each passing season. The 5th and final dreary installment concluded the show in 2021. Helix. It is safe to say the world has never seen a show with a premise quite like Helix's when the apocalyptic addition to the horror genre debuted in 2014. The series focuses on a team of scientists who travel to the Arctic, seeking to investigate what appears to be the outbreak of a disease capable of threatening the lasting survival of mankind. This enticing plotline swiftly morphs into an even more intriguing story. The concept of immortality is unexpectedly introduced into the medical and science-rooted base of proceedings. Regrettably, Helix on the whole does not even come close to living up to the intrinsic quality the show's premise would indicate. Helix isn't terrible by any stretch of the imagination, but the inescapably average nature of the series' quality looms large throughout its 2-season run. The dystopian horror is predictable, the performances are hammy over the top, and the sci-fi horror CGI is absolutely atrocious in several instances. It's truly depressing to have to condemn a show that appeared as promising as Helix to the scrap pile of franchises that failed to make the most of what appeared to be a groundbreaking new core concept. The subpar quality of this distinctly average sci-fi horror offering meant that while the aforementioned condemning may have been depressing, there was a notable sense of inevitability about it. Chambers. When Netflix's horror series Chambers was announced, the premise of the planned show sounded absolutely gripping. A young girl receives a heart transplant only to be plagued by mysterious visions. She realizes that the paranormal events are as a result of the deceased donor of her replacement heart and embarks on unraveling the latter's horrifyingly unsettling story. With such an entirely unique and original premise, what could possibly go wrong? Sadly, as viewers swiftly discover, quite literally everything. Chambers is frightfully dull and soulless. The plot crawls along at an absolute snail's pace, particularly within the first few episodes, while the show simultaneously overreaches in the manner with which it tries to build mystery and suspense, culminating in what can only be described as calamitously damp squib of a finale. A strong lead performance from Sivan Rose can't save Chambers from what is a thoroughly underwhelming horror outing. Even the efforts of cinema icon Uma Thurman in a supporting role can't bring Chambers kicking and screaming back to life. The show stands as a dismally limp attempt at bringing what appeared to be a breathtaking premise to life, resulting in its less than surprising cancellation cancellation after one woeful season. The Mist. The Mist's premise, that a dystopian world shrouded in the titular unexplained and malevolently paranormal mist, is clearly worthy of further exploration. Stephen King's 1980 novella was wildly successful, so successful in fact that it spawned a film adaptation and a follow-up TV series. While 2007's feature-length offering was received positively for the most part by critics, the same cannot be said for the lifeless show that Spike was unfortunate enough to air in 2017. King's core premise is swiftly and soullessly ripped apart by a disastrous combination of shoddy character development, flagging storylines, and a complete lack of respect for the original's concept. Despite some strong instances of CGI, The Mist is legitimately hard to watch, a dull, meandering mess that predictably fails to surpass woeful demonstrations of acting and production. This sorry state of affairs was not lost on network executives who cancelled the dismal outing soon after the debut season aired. It appears almost inconceivable that a show based on such an enthralling concept could lose its way quite so badly, but do so The Mist does, with surprisingly little difficulty given the inherent quality of the show's original source material. This melancholic fact is further underlined by the fact that said source material is written by none other than the man universally regarded as the king of horror, Scream. Wes Craven's 1996 slasher bonanza Scream revitalized the flagging subgenre in blockbuster fashion. Scream's rampant commercial and critical success led to the commission of a multi-film franchise and even a television series based on the same universe. Ultimately, however, MTV's aforementioned anthology show runs into the same roadblocks that led to the slasher subgenre stagnating in the first place. The show is bland, uninspired, and most egregiously of all for a horror outing, not very scary. It is also notable for a disastrously misjudged attempt at reimagining the iconic Ghostface mask. Scream does have some redemptive qualities. Some of the character exploration in the later seasons is genuinely compelling in patches, while the tongue-in-cheek manner of production also received praise. That led to 3 seasons being commissioned before the show's cancellation. Nevertheless, with the exception of a brief uptick in positive reviews for the second season, Scream never received more than lukewarm critical reception, an egregious failure when one considers the innate quality of the thrilling fictional bedrock that inspired it. Indeed, while Scream's original premise is boundlessly exciting, it could be argued that basing a series on a franchise that had its heyday in the late 1990s doomed MTV's outing from the get-go. Black Summer. Black Summer is the perfect case study in why zombie flicks are no longer classed as flogging a dead horse within the horror genre. There's almost nothing left of said horse. What remains of the unfortunate metaphorical beast appears to have been pulverized slowly in a meat grinder by the seemingly endless tidal wave of cinematic zombie offerings. Z Nation, the show upon which prequel Black Summer is based, is one of those outings that remains an enjoyable, silly romp despite not garnering much in the way of positive critical reception. Featuring the requisite amount of bloodshed and excitement for a zombie-themed show, Z Nation was more concerned with showing their viewers a good time rather than trying to invoke some type of introspective debate on the nature of humanity, surviving for 5 successful seasons on Sci-Fi. The fact that Z Nation was an example of a series willing to laugh at its own inherent ridiculousness was a key strength that prequel series Black Summer has neglected to imitate. Gone is the tongue-in-cheek silliness replaced with dour, agonizing, thick characters. Their non-existent development is dragged down even further by constant and confusing time jumps, while the plot is clunky and riddled with holes. It is unfathomable as to why the producers of the so-called prequel chose to depart quite so drastically from the tropes and premise that made Z Nation such an unexpected success story. Hannibal. Following the stupendous second season of NBC's Hannibal, capped off by one of the most shocking cliffhanger season finales in television history, it appeared that the show was in the process of hitting its stride in the most impressive of fashions. Despite the first season garnering a positive critical reception, the rave reviews from audiences didn't start flooding in until the considerably faster-paced second installment, which concludes with the fates of essentially every main character left up in the air in a breathless final sequence. This makes the failures of the third season that much more egregious. Gone were the complex twisting story threads and gripping narrative, to be replaced with a considerably less engaging plotline which meandered along a snail's pace. The episodes in which Will hunts for Hannibal in Italy are particularly dull, even more so when one considers the explosive nature of the events that immediately preceded them. The pacing of the third season is also notably bizarre. The narrative absolutely crawls through the first half depicting the events of Lecter's long-awaited capture, before hurtling through Red Dragon's storyline at what feels like light speed, failing to do appropriate justice to a villain as wickedly epic as Francis Dolarhyde. Hannibal was ultimately cancelled soon after the third season premiered, leaving the fate of the main characters frustratingly ambiguous. While said season is ultimately a fine offering of television on the whole, one cannot escape the sense that the phenomenal premise that fueled the audacious events of the first two seasons was no more. Dracula. Considering the literary stature of Count Dracula as a character, it is legitimately surprising that so few cinematic takes on the world's most famous vampire have managed to do him in a satisfactory manner. NBC's 2013 single-season offering Dracula unfortunately falls into the aforementioned category, but not for the reasons one might think. The show featured some stunning visuals, an engrossing lead performance with Jonathan Rhys-Meyers as the eponymous Count, and received glowing feedback from audiences and critics alike. The new take on Dracula sees him posing as a wealthy entrepreneur seeking to gain revenge on a mysterious shadowy organization known as the Order of the Dragon. Sadly, despite what appeared to be a blank canvas on which to finally do justice to Bram Stoker's classic character, NBC drove a stake through the show's heart and cancelled it after just one season. Dracula failed to keep up with the stratospheric ratings of contemporary competitors such as Game of Thrones and True Blood, but that took nothing away from the intrinsic quality of the gorgeous spectacle that was beginning to unfold. Regrettably, despite such promising early omens, Dracula is ultimately remembered as a show that was cancelled before it could begin to take full advantage of what was such a thrilling premise.